What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to have a conversation about fallacies and specifically fallacious propaganda. And I'm actually going to use my Facebook as a case study. There is a post, a meme that I responded to on my page, and I got some comments on it. And I kind of want to use this as an example to kind of walk us through how easily it is to fallaciously attach yourself to something. Because it seems to be that many times in the secular community, we think that fallacy and bias it's just something that that is just a problem that is unique to believers. But in all honesty, human beings tend to be naturally fallacious, and it's really only in that understanding that you can properly safeguard yourself against falling into fallacies and illogical arguments. And so we're going to jump into that. Before we do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider joining our community or supporting our community, and consider checking out our merch because it's dope. Don't you want to think responsibility hoodie? It's getting cold out there. I said think responsibility. Think responsibly. All right, that's where that was. I guess I wasn't thinking responsibly when I said it. All right, so let's jump into this. Let me give you a little bit of context, and I'm warning you now. This is going to be a bit of a wild ride. So let's go. And the reason this is going to be a wild ride is because this is a sensitive topic. Politics and religion are two of the most sensitive topics, at least in this country. And as you see, I have no problem talking about religion. So guess what? I have no problem talking about politics either. So some things I may say may piss you off, but hey, get used to it, right? All right. So there was a meme that's being popularly circulated around Facebook, primarily by atheists in the secular community. And of course, the atheist and secular community is not monolithic. However, there are several people in the atheist and secular community who will very much treat you that if you do not share agreements with them on all things, that you are somehow less than. Right? To me, this meme is an example of that. And because like religion, politics are extremely personal, you know. But this was the meme. The context of the meme was voting third party is a good way to let marginalized groups know that your abstract principles are more important than their very real lives. There's a few problems with this, and I'm going to highlight them. But just right off the bat, before I let you know what I attach my post to, is right off the bat is I'm always cautious of pronouns. Okay, when you say voting third party is a good way to let marginalized groups know that your abstract principles. This is a cattle call post. So you actually don't know who the fuck you're talking to. So you don't know if their principles are abstract or not. But I'll share my response. My response was posts like this are absolutely disgusting. And that's my opinion. And I do stand on that. Because it either irresponsibly or purposely neglects to consider that many of the third party voters are indeed marginalized groups. You know, like, and that's kind of, like, I can't even lie. That does piss me off a little bit, like, because who the fuck are you to speak for all marginalized groups? Especially when there are quite a few marginalized groups who vote third party for very valid reasons. Yikes. So, voter shaming is the political censure of dissent. This should be intolerable as it is a threat to democracy. Voting is not just how a party wins, it's how we take the temperature of the nation. How do we know what Americans want if we keep telling them to ignore their own conscience, to support others? This is how you kill democracy. So that was my post. First thing I want to do here is I want to identify the fallacies in the meme because I know that many of you may agree with that meme. And if you do, I want you to understand that you are 100% being fallacious. Let's identify these fallacies. Now, of course, the meme presents a common argument against voting for third party candidates, particularly in the context of significant elections where people feel the stakes are perceived as high for marginalized groups. And there's so much nuance to that I can get into. But here's a critique, and I'm just going to be focusing on the logical fallacies here. The first one is the false dilemma, also known as a false dichotomy. The meme presents the issue as a binary choice, suggesting that one either votes for a major party to directly support marginalized groups or selfishly votes for a third party based on abstract principles. And if I could just be absolute honest here, voting is supposed to be selfish. You're supposed to be voting for your self-interest. I mean, ugh, I don't know what to tell you about that. But yeah, and this also ignores the possibility that one might vote for a third party because they feel it offers better long-term benefits for marginalized groups or aligns more closely with policies that could effectively address their issues. It assumes there are only two valid options when in reality the situation might be more nuanced. There's also an appeal to emotion, which is very popular every 4 years. This meme leverages emotional manipulation by framing the decision to vote for a third party as a direct disregard for the lives of marginalized people. How disgusting is that? Because I am a marginalized person and I do vote third party. So fuck you for dehumanizing me. It plays on the voter's guilt and sense of responsibility, suggesting that their vote for a third party is an ethical failure. This type of argument can distract from more rational or policy based discussions about the merits of third party platforms. And just for those of you who don't understand, I come from a long history of people who preferred to support third parties. That would be Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, W.E.B. Du Bois, yes, Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, straw man. By simplifying the motivations of third party voters to mere abstract principles. And that's just horrible. To talk about people you don't know, you know, the meme does not engage with the actual reasons someone might choose to vote for a third party, such as dissatisfaction with the platforms or effectiveness of the major parties. And just to be honest, as a black man, that's the shit I'm tired of from the Democratic Party, that I don't have a right to be disappointed in your fucking failure towards my community. But I will not be bullied. I'm not bullying anybody else to be anything that they're not. You're not going to be able to bully me either. I'm a Taurus, bitch. No, I'm stop. But no, seriously. But such as dissatisfaction with the platforms of effectiveness of the major parties, it reduces complex political decisions to a caricature that is easier to dismiss or criticize. And then there's obviously ad hominem. The argument indirectly attacks the character of third party voters by suggesting they place their principles above the welfare of others, painting them as selfish or uncaring. And I'm like, what the fuck are you if people are saying this is what I want to vote for because this matches my lived experience, and you're telling them, well, you are a threat to the human race? Like, get out of here with that type of hypocrisy. In that way, many people in the secular community remind me absolutely of the type of foolishness that I witnessed in church. This shifts the debate from the policies or effectiveness of third party voting to the personal qualities of the voters themselves. And just to be true, voting should not be a debate. We shouldn't be debating about what other people vote for. Voting is a thermostat, you know, or a thermometer, but we're treating it like a thermostat. Each of these fallacies actually serves to undermine a genuine discussion about the role of third party voting in a democratic society and whether it can be an effective strategy for political change or support for marginalized communities. And I will add here, the insistence on it has to be just two parties. That removes us from being a democracy and puts us square in the realms of being an oligarchy. So, Now let's get into some of the responses, and I'm taking two responses here. I'm taking a response from a believer, and I'm taking a response from a non-believer. And in both of these cases, I want you to keep in mind what they're responding to, and to help it easier, to make this easier for you. My response was. The meme was voting third party is a good way to let marginalized groups know that your abstract principles are more important than their very real lives. And my response was posts like this are absolutely disgusting because it either irresponsibly or purposefully neglects to consider that many of the third party voters are marginalized groups. Voter shaming is the political censure of dissent. This should be intolerable as it is a threat to democracy. Voting is not just how a party wins, it's how we take the temperature of the nation. How do we know what Americans want if we keep telling them to ignore their own conscience to support others? This is how you kill democracy. And I would also like to point out that there is actually a major flaw in the logic of this meme, is by saying that voting third party, you're ignoring marginalized groups. You're ignoring the fact that by being a third party, by fucking definition, it would be a marginalized group. Hello. Maybe it's not your favorite marginalized group, which is what happens with black people every 4 years in elections. We're never the favorite marginalized group. We're the most vocal. We're the ones that are used to pander. We're the ones that you get the rappers and the strippers and the actors out there, while almost every time overlooking our scholars. That shit is irresponsible. This is why I don't support the Democratic Party. I don't. I'm not telling you not to. I don't. And I have that right. And I wish you would try to take it away from me. You know? So I read all of that just to give to so that you can keep in mind what they're responding to. This first person, which is a person I've met one time, we were speaking at an event together. We were speaking at the same event. He says, I think in principle this is true. So to be clear, he's saying he thinks in principle voter shaming is wrong and is intolerable. But, and for those of you who do not know, but is a replacement conjunction, which means while I do think that in theory voter shaming is wrong, let me give you all my reasons why I think voter shaming is appropriate. That's not a great way to start a conversation with me. All right, so he says, but when RFK Jr. goes on the news to pull out of a race to cause maximum pain to an opponent, it shows some of these third parties are rooted in pandering and still working for one of the two parties. Can anybody already see the problem with this argument? We have 7 official parties, yet most of them don't run on an actual platform anymore. This is his argument. This is his argument. Yikes. They take the most emotional issue, such as what the meme just did, that impacts one part or the other and claims to be an advocate for it, such as the meme claiming to be an advocate for marginalized groups, while simultaneously attacking marginalized groups. If third and fourth parties were offering honest agendas and not funded by traditional pubs and Dems, I would agree with you. All right, so please, just because you're not mindful enough to know when you're saying some stupid shit doesn't mean I have to pretend like you're not saying some stupid shit. And this whole thing was stupid shit. His argument is because third parties are working for the two parties, then you shouldn't vote for third parties. Like this is his idea is no, don't vote for third parties because they're being funded by the primary parties. And your inference is the primary parties are bad and they're funding the third parties. What? What are you actually saying here? He says, I would agree with you that voter shaming is bad, but Democrats and Republicans are supporting third parties anyways. So no, and besides, RFK dropped out of a race to do damage to his opponent. That's what the fuck a race is, dude. Like I'm sorry, I don't jump on fear-mongering bandwagons. Number one, because I'm not afraid of shit. You know, so that's just never going to work with me. So I get RFK dropping out of the race has you shaking in your boots. It does not for me. There has not been a president in this country, not even Barack Obama, that stood up for the rights of black people. So no, as much as these presidential campaigns mean something to you, they don't mean that much to me. And that's your fault, not mine. So he says the intent today is to draw people emotionally to manipulate and waste their vote, which is exactly what the meme was trying to do. What he's doing, he's giving a case for why voter shaming is appropriate. But like, I want y'all to understand, like, this is what both parties do every 4 years, and nobody really calls it out. We keep pretending like like one of these parties is lesser of the two evils. They're not. They're just not evil to you because you're not fucking black. They're not evil to you because you're not Palestinian. They're not evil to you because you're not LGBTQ. These are the nuances you have to consider, that everybody who's going to the polls to vote has a different lived experience. So this idea of trying to say that your lived experience makes you an expert on who other people should vote for is disgusting. So my response to this was saying the third parties are supported by the traditional parties says nothing positive about the traditional parties. And it still does nothing to justify silencing those who dissent. Literally saying you shouldn't vote for them because they're secretly paid by my party. That's literally what you're saying. You're saying voting for them is voting for me, so don't do that. How do you not realize how stupid that is? Okay. So he says, our dissent is honest. The powers that be concerned for it isn't. Again, who the fuck is the powers that be, and how are you affiliated with their concern? A part of intelligence is not just knowing what you know, it's also knowing what you don't know, and it's also being able to recognize what other people do not have the ability to know. And you don't have the capacity to know who has a concern for anything. This is more of that emotional appealing. Yes, of course, people of any race, creed, or culture are not monolithic. What does that have to do with the topic? But when one group is bent on destroying you, being the voice of when this he wrote this weird. But when one group is bent on destroying you, being the voice of dissent during that moment shows you can't see the forest for the trees. Now he's not actually supplied any evidence for this. He just keeps on making statements. I used to teach this, he says. It's what makes it scary. If a house is burning down and someone points to unplugged refrigerator and says the food is going to spoil, yes, that is a valid and factual concern. So he just reduced voter shaming to a minor issue. Well, voter shaming, we should be this is the problem with humans. You can always come up with a reason to justify your dehumanization of someone else. And the thing is, you don't require your reasons to be valid, as we see here. The average person will never study the wicked problem. So what he's saying is, because average people won't study the things that I've studied, they're not qualified to vote. Now, I'm sorry, but is this not what the Democrats have been complaining about that the Republican Party has been doing? Trying to disqualify people from voting? Like, man, it's the pot calling the kettle black. And like, to me, that shit is disingenuous. He says, solving or understanding the master manipulation it takes to keep you hyper-focused on single issue you don't fully understand. So now he's assuming that millions of Americans don't understand what he understands. And the superiority complex is mind-blowing to me. He says, I am an independent for a reason. Which part of his response has demonstrated that this brother is an independent? There is a clear and present agenda here, and it's not independent. It is not bipartisan by any shape, form, or fashion. He says no party is perfect. This ain't Goldilocks. There is not just a right. There is not a just right, but proximity to power is a thing. I want to highlight a few things here. He's arguing stuff that I've never said. I never said that either party is perfect. I never said third parties are perfect. I never said there is a Goldilocks zone. I never said there is a just right. I said voter shaming is intolerable. That's what I said. All right. And then this thing about proximity to power is a thing. I hate this because this is strategy that has been used on the black community by the Democratic Party since the 60s. And this shit is disgusting. By even opening your mouth to say proximity to power, what you're saying is that we are powerless. Fuck you. I do not need you for my power. When you vote away from power, there it is again, it continually thrives without you. No one will care about it. You have to fight where you are not welcomed or heard sometimes. No, I do not. That is your decision, not mine. I do not have to come to the same conclusions that you did. Again, I've already highlighted he's being dishonest when he says he's an independent. Again, I have been with this brother or at least one time. And that one event that we were at, he made very clear to let everybody know that he was a Democrat. And this is the believer, mind you, but it doesn't shock me because believers also lie a lot. But it's just not believers. People lie. And this is one of the reasons I'm not moved by much of anything that somebody else says unless you have evidence. So also notice how he's loading information into the conversation that has nothing to do with the point I made, unless I am to conclude that he's providing these as reasons why political censure is appropriate. And in a democracy, that's disgusting. That like you don't know what a republic is. You don't know what a democracy is if you're trying to argue for reasons why political censure and voter shaming is appropriate. So he says, lots of times the manipulation to silence those who dissent is to push them away. We used to do it in IO all the time. It's a tactic. Now notice at this moment, and I'm gonna point out a few more fallacies here, but notice in this moment, he's also trying to use jargon to over assert his specialized knowledge. But the problem with this is knowing what you know gives you no insight into what another person doesn't know. So just because you know that you know what these terms are doesn't mean that you know that I don't. And I absolutely do know what IO is because I've been fascinated with industrial organizational psychology since I was in high school. And this is one of the biggest things that I have a problem. I don't like when people who don't know me make assertions about me because I don't make assertions about anybody else. So I responded, bro, everything you just stated is logically fallacious. You have no right to tell others how to vote, period. That's my stance because that's what my post is. And he says, I think people should know the truth about what they're voting for. It's not about telling people who to vote for. It's a manipulation game. Yes, and you are doing the manipulation. If people take their vote seriously, it should be done in truth. Are you the arbitrator of objective truth for people? Telling someone to vote without context or just because you don't like their choice is wrong. Who has told anybody to vote without context? And how do you tell someone to vote just because you don't like their choice? Like, this isn't even a clear sentence. If you are exposing truth, there is nothing wrong with ensuring voters are informed. Again, who says there's anything wrong with ensuring voters are informed? I'm saying, how is telling someone that if you don't vote my way, you're overlooking marginalized groups? How is that informing? I've already demonstrated that it's not even true. All right. He says, we have entire nonprofits dedicated to it. I know. I run one. It's called DLDD World Group. One of our biggest projects is Together We Can. Except for, unlike him, my focus isn't national. My focus is global. My focus is not patriotic. My focus is for people. My focus is not specialized. My focus is for the species. Now, the issue here is that this assumes that your specialized knowledge is automatically more trustworthy than the conscience of millions of voters who don't share your conclusions. And so you're literally saying if people don't come to the same conclusion I came to, then they are absolutely wrong. And in that case, it is absolutely okay for me to shame them into being on my side. This is how politics are played in this country. And I don't care if I have to be the only person calling it out. I'm going to call it out every time because it's wrong. Not only is your specialized knowledge still subject to your biases and ignorances, it also in no way gives you specialized insight into people you don't know. You're still just a blind man touching your part of the elephant. And we need not forget that. He responded, you'll have to explain where I am being logically fallacious. That was a given. I knew that. And guess what? I did. So let's go. First, fallacy that we see here is hasty generalization in his responses. This fallacy occurs when a conclusion is drawn from insufficient evidence. The claim that most of the parties don't run on an actual platform anymore and generalize the behavior of third parties based on potentially limited observations are examples, such as RFK Jr.'s action. This is a hasty generalization. It assumes that all or most third parties behave similarly based on one or a few instances without substantial proof that this is a widespread or universal practice among all third parties, which is funny that he made this hasty generalization while also trying to say that humanity is complex and nuanced, while he is also trying to say that he has a handle on all of that nuance and complexity, while not actually demonstrating any evidence to show that. The next one is ad hominem and definitely around the circumstantial aspect. This argument implies that because some third parties may be funded by traditional Republicans and Democrats, their agendas and advocacy are inherently dishonest or manipulative. And I'd add that if this was true, then that would mean the Democrats and the Republicans who are supporting them are also inherently dishonest or manipulative. Like, that's what I say. Like, how do you not realize that you put your foot in your mouth in a major way? This attacks the party's circumstances, funding sources, rather than directly addressing the validity of their policies, platforms, or actions. Straw man. The argument constructs a simplified or exaggerated version of the position of third parties, stating that they take the most emotional issue that impacts one part of the other and claims to be an advocate for it, as if that's not what's been being done in politics for the past 50 to 60 years. Of course, this misrepresents the actual positions or complexities of third party platforms, which may indeed be based on genuine advocacy or diverse issues. There's an appeal to emotion. This statement concludes with the idea that the intent of third parties is to draw people emotionally to manipulate and waste their vote. This is an appeal to emotion as it plays on fears of wasted votes and emotional manipulation without any concrete evidence that this is the intention or effect of all third party candidacies. There's also the false dilemma. By suggesting that parties must either offer honest agendas not funded by traditional parties or they are simply manipulating voters, the argument presents as a false dilemma. This overlooks the possibility that parties can have complex motivations and funding sources while still contributing positively to political discourse or genuinely representing alternative views. Which the interesting thing is that is exactly what he's saying the party of his choice does, is that we're just wrestling with the complexity of all these things. Nobody's going to be just right. But then your argument against the third parties is that they're not just right. All right. So he's going to do some more. He says, Darante, my nonprofit studies these things. These are not generalizations. Listen, brother, saying your nonprofit studies these things and saying these are not generalizations is not the same thing as demonstrating that these are not generalizations. All right. You should read about Alec and Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove has nothing to do with voter shaming. The assumption that people like this make, and this is what I want to call out, pseudo intellect is running amok in this country. And we're at this place where we cannot tell when someone genuinely has an understanding of what they're saying and what they don't. And when they don't, I can. This brother doesn't have the slightest clue. I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm not saying he's not brilliant in any other areas, but I am saying in this, he has demonstrated horribly that his whole engagement with this idea is fallacious. He says these are true grassroots movements in this world, and there are astroturfed movements. Is part of my field of study, especially when we conduct pestle analysis of states on micro and macro and meso levels. I don't comment on things I haven't researched myself. You've given me 3 paragraphs of comments, and none of them have you demonstrated any evidence. All you've done is said, I know because I know, and I know because I know, and I know because I know. You sound like a bootleg preacher to me. And these were actually the vibes he did give off when he and I met the first time. Um, Again, my desire is people engage with honest brokers to their cause. You have no control over that. That is how it is supposed to work. Yes, parties can have much needed political discourse. We can write an entire book on how things are supposed to work. But humans and wicked problems are complex, adaptive systems in their own right. To not study it does a disservice to yourself and others. He's the second Democrat that I've dealt with that has, with no evidence of my academic background, tried to use their academic background to basically like little bro me. But I'm like, the thing that where you overplay your hand at is that you never interrogated my areas of studies, which I make it very clear I'm a sociologist. So to accuse me to not studying because I don't agree with you, these are the games that churches and politicians play with people over and over again. And I'm going to call the bullshit out over and over again. So let me give you my critique of his response. And really just pointing out some more fallacies here. The most obvious one here is appeal to authority. All right. He mentions that his nonprofit studies these topics and therefore implies that his statements are based on credible research and should be trusted. Now, while his experience and expertise lend weight to his arguments, the appeal to authority doesn't necessarily validate the claims themselves unless he's provided specific research findings that directly address the points in questions, which out of 3 fucking paragraphs, he never stopped once to do it. His communication strategy was trust me, and here are the reasons you should trust me, as opposed to, hey, well, here's some information you could read. You know what I'm saying? According to this research, none of that ever happened. See, I'm not interested in anybody's degree unless you can demonstrate why you have it. Please understand. Another major issue is it's just the lack of evidence presented. He references ALEC and Bohemian Grove as examples to support his claim about grassroots versus astroturf movements. However, without explaining what these examples demonstrate or how they relate specifically to the discussion, which they do not, they serve more as name dropping rather than as substantive evidence. Vagueness. The responses mention conducting analysis. And for those of you who don't know, the pestle analysis is political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental analysis at different levels, but does not specify how these analyses support his argument about political movements or grassroots or authenticity, or my point, voter shaming. This lack of specificity can leave the reader unclear about the connection between his nonprofit's work and the discussion topic, which it seems that he's unclear about the connection. And then also, again, there's this false dichotomy. While not explicit, there's a subtle implication that movements are either grassroots or astroturf. With no acknowledgement of the spectrum that might exist between these two extremes, this simplification can overlook the complexities and nuances of how movements develop and operate. And not to fall into the same appeal to authority situation, but I'm not telling you this to say trust me. I'm telling you this to say this is why I typically don't trust other people, because of my sociological background. I understand that things are incredibly nuanced, and so I am incredibly resistant to extremism. And what this brother is producing, and what I honestly see being produced on both sides, it's amazing to me that Democrats can see all of the problems with Republicans, but can't interrogate their own party the same damn way. Like both parties are nothing more than bandwagon fallacy. That's my opinion. That's not a claim. That's just my opinion. All right. And it's an emotionally charged one, for real, for sure. Um, but then there's also the moral high ground, which I hate this one. To not study, it does a disservice to yourself and others. Um, like suggest that anyone who hasn't engaged in similar studies may not be qualified to comment or understand these issues fully. And notice, like his whole argument here are reasons we should be able to shame other people into voting the way that we want them to vote. And I assure you, if the Republicans were using this exact same type of tactic, saying that, hey, voting for Democrats is throwing away from your vote, Democrats would be crying foul because it is foul. Um, this can be seen as assuming a moral high ground, implying a superior position due to his studies, which can alienate or dismiss other viewpoints without engaging with their arguments directly. And that's the problem that he's made here, is that he has actually not engaged my arguments at all. This person is claiming to have specialized knowledge in sociological statistics, but doesn't even understand the basics of research ethics, which is something that I did call out in my initial post. In sociological statistics, when the outcomes of a survey are influenced by pressuring participants, it is referred to as response bias. More specifically, this kind of influence can be categorized under a type of response bias known as social desirability bias, peer pressure. This occurs when respondents answer questions in a manner that they believe will be viewed favorably by others, which can be due to the pressure of conforming to the perceived expectations of the researcher or society. This bias can lead to inaccurate or skewed data because participants may not answer honestly, but rather in a way that they think is acceptable or expected. In that sense, I do want you to realize that that type of pressure is absolutely voter suppression. That's not me saying that from my opinion. That is a sociological reality. A vote is a survey, okay? And we are dependent on that data to know what the fuck we're doing. And we're not getting an honest look at ourselves. But another issue in research ethics, and just ethics, period, mind you, is coercion. Coercion in surveys occurs when respondents feel compelled or forced to provide specific responses due to overt or subtle pressures. This unethical practice undermines the voluntariness of participation, which is a core ethical principle in research. And I do need to remind you that voting is a survey of the people. Okay? It is supposed to be done voluntarily. It is supposed to be done honestly and authentically. And just because somebody else's honesty and authenticity doesn't reflect your conclusions, doesn't give you the right to steal their vote or to pressure them into voting your way. I would think in a secular community we wouldn't have issues with this, but we're going to move to the next one in a few. In research ethics, ensuring that participants provide informed consent freely without any form of coercion is crucial. Coercion can significantly affect the reliability and validity of the data collected, as it may not accurately reflect the respondents' true opinions or experiences. Our goal shouldn't just to be a democracy. We should be a true democracy where we are accurately trying to to reflect and represent the values and issues of the people who live here. All right, so let's move on to another responder. This one will be a little shorter. This one ended quickly. And this person's, to be clear, their first response wasn't a negative response, but I'm going to address it, and you'll see why I do. I won't call it negative. I'll call it random. All right. So hopefully I don't have to read what I said again because y'all already know. But so this is from a non-believer at this time, and this person responded, "I'm pretty sure Project 2025 will speed up the process of killing democracy. Just saying." Okay. Now again, this is a person that I don't even know, and like I don't know, man. Like, some of y'all on Facebook are absolutely weird to me. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't go on people's posts who I don't agree with and say something about their post because I feel like they have a right to share what they think on their page, you know, and they're not my politicians, you know. But so I did respond to this, but before I respond to it, I want to kind of give you the reason why. The first thing is that there was lack of context for this. So you already know that my post is about voter shaming and about how voting is how we take the temperature of a nation, and so this should be intolerable because it's a threat to democracy. So he says, well, Project 2025 is killing democracy. And this is definitely giving Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter vibes, which we pretended was only a Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing. But this is a common thing that we do to people where we basically say, hey, I know this issue is more important to you, but because this other issue is more important to me, you should stop talking about your issue. And I'm like, hey, grow the fuck up. You have a page. You can talk about the issues that are important to you on your page. And many of those issues I will agree with. So actually, I don't agree with this. I don't agree that Project 2025 will speed up the process of killing democracy because Project 2025 is over 50 years old. It's never worked. It's only getting visibility this year because of Trump's vocality. But even in that, and I do find that disingenuous about all of the Democrats who are just now hearing about Project 2025, which is basically just the Heritage Foundation, who are acting like, oh, this is something that just recently happened. That's dishonest engagement, you know. But then also thinking that a small group is going to ruin democracy is also dishonest engagement. To think that means you actually haven't engaged with how democracy actually works, nor have you even engaged with how humanity actually works. Which is why I'm not afraid of anybody becoming president. I'm going to make my vote for whoever I make my vote for. And if the person I vote for doesn't get it, I'm not going to hate everybody who didn't vote for that person. And if the person who does get it is an absolute jackass, I will make sure that their jackassery stops at my door or I will die trying. See, I'm a different kind of beast. But so the first issue that I kind of had here, and an issue not even in a problematic state, but issue in the sense that I'm having trouble understanding what you're trying to communicate here because there's a lack of context. The mention of Project 2025 is abrupt and lacks any explanation of context without specifying what Project 2025 is or how it relates to the process of killing democracy. The statement could confuse or mislead readers, but even more so by not tying in your mention of Project 2025 to voter shaming. It's also confusing. And then there's a tone issue. The casual and somewhat dismissive tone indicated by just saying might undermine the seriousness of the topic at hand, which is democracy and voter engagement. It suggests a flippant approach to significant issues. All right. So, with that, I responded to the person. Do you consider that a valid reason to shame voters? Now, obviously, I asked this because the context lends itself to this being an inference that because of Project 2025 and the threat that it represents, voter shaming should be tolerable. So I asked as not to assume, something that both of these responders would have benefited from, you know? Intelligence is led by curiosity, not trying to change other people's minds. Intelligent people change their own minds. You get that? We're in the Sunday session series now called "Changing My Mind," and we're talking about these things. So his response is, "No, I don't think any human should be shamed for any reason, nor did I suggest as much." All right. He's now inferring that my question for clarity was putting words in his mouth. So I said, never said you did. I was looking for how your comment was related to the point. Perhaps it was not. He says, I guess my retort would be that there is more than one way to kill democracy. That being said, I agree with your sentiment about shaming voters, but remember I told you but is a replacement conjunction. So what you're about to do here is you're about to say, I agree that we should not be shaming voters. And remember, he just said earlier, he doesn't think humans should be shamed for any reason. But this but demonstrates he's about to give a reason why he thinks humans should be shamed. But when you have a candidate telling a crowd that they will fix it and you'll never have to vote again, How should I or anyone else interpret that? Not like you should be shaming voters, for damn sure. Sounds an awful lot like the death of democracy, and it's all documented in Project 2025. So, there's something here that I'm betting you missed. There's a hint of hostility here. I recognize the hostility from his first comment, but I do not guide myself by my instincts. I have to verify, which is why I ask questions. But I recognize that his post, while it seemed random to others, that it was a hostile post. He was offended that I was calling out voter shaming because he feels that we should only be calling out Project 2025. And it also because he was triggered because he likely knows that he's one of those people who participates in voter shaming. That honestly, that's why I feel like both of these people responded, is because they were triggered and felt like they had to defend their need to shame other people. And I don't need you to defend your need. I don't need you to, because I'm not going to change where I stand based off of your defense. I change where I stand based off of curiosity. You're not going to beat me into submission. But even though even though I noticed that hint of hostility with the first post, this post cemented it. And I wonder if you caught it. It's a word that he used. The word that he used was retort. Not response, not reply, not answer, retort. Forgive me, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but language and communication are kind of important to me. So let's define retort so you'll understand this hint of hostility that I'm speaking of. Retort means to say something in answer to an accusation, typically in a sharp, angry, or wittily incisive manner. I have not accused this man. Retort means to repay an insult or injury. I have not insulted him, nor have I injured him. This all implies that he was offended by my post, yet he keeps hiding it as something other than, which I find to be incredibly disingenuous. But let's also critique this response. There's the ambiguity fallacy. The reply uses ambiguous references to both the candidate statement and Project 2025. There's an appeal to fear. The implication that a single candidate statement about fixing the system so you'll never have to vote again could lead to the death of democracy is an appeal to fear. And honestly, like this is the same thing that we're saying that the other side is doing. We're literally doing the same thing. Like it makes no sense. And then we're also trying to say, because these people are so bad, we should feel okay dehumanizing other people. We should feel okay shaming other voters. If that's really how you feel, then you don't want a democracy. If that's really how you feel, then you don't even want a nation that is reflective of everybody's values. You want a nation that only reflects your values. You want an echo chamber. And if that's what you want, in my opinion, you are just as bad as the conservatives. Like, get the fuck out of here, man. Slippery slope. Similar to an appeal to fear, this reply suggests a slippery slope. But then there's also the red herring or irrelevant theses. I like that. This fallacy, which can also be understood as loading the conversation with off-topic issues, which we saw the first person doing, occurs when someone introduces an irrelevant point into the discussion to divert attention from the original topic. The responder introduces Project 2025 and a candidate statement about making it unnecessary to vote again. This is diverting the topic. And again, and what he's really being dishonest, while diverting the topic, what he's not flat out saying, though it is severely implied, is that it's because that this person is a threat that we should shame voters. There's also the avoidance of direct engagement, which both of these responders, did very well, for lack of better words. By shifting focus to Project 2025 and statements about the end of voting, the responder avoids directly addressing the core issues related to the meme's claims about third-party voting and its effects on marginalized groups. Instead, they introduce new, potentially emotionally charged topics that are not directly relevant to the initial discussion. And my biggest issues with things like this, especially red herring, which I do call out red herrings as much as I can, is because a red herring is designed to be distraction and confusion. Like it's literally, hey, I disagree with what you're saying, but here's some things that have absolutely nothing to do with what you're saying. And hopefully, but if people agree with me about these things, they will automatically dismiss what you're saying. And the sad thing is, many people will. Many people will see Project 2025 and see red. Many people will see Donald Trump and see red. My problem is, I know that Donald Trump is a reality TV star. So he's not a threat to me. And again, I know that Project 2025 has existed for a long time. I actually used to be a part of a church that was very closely related to the Heritage Foundation. And I know how weak in numbers they actually are. You know, interrogate your fears. It'll help you. Yeah. And like, I don't, and I'm not one of those people who trust that I should be afraid of something just because you're afraid of something. I wouldn't have made it this far in my life if I was that type of person. And so my response to Scott was, who said there was only one way? And how does my statement about this post have anything to do with how you interpret Project 2025 or Trump? My post was about neither. Again, your point seems to have nothing to do with my statement. Now, I want you to notice this because I get this a lot. I've been polite, casual, and professional, articulate with both of these responders. You know, this responder, his response to that, okay, nice talking to you, friend, in quotation marks. These microaggressions would be harmful if this wasn't a complete and total stranger insinuating that because I didn't see his point that I wasn't being friendly. Now, you please let me know at which point was I being rude or which point that I was being dismissive, especially with this brother. I simply asked him a question and then he just tried to load in some more fallacies. And then I asked him, well, when did I say any of those things? When did I tell anybody how you should interpret Project 2025 or how you should feel about what Trump is saying? I didn't say any of that. I said voter shaming is intolerable. But now, you know, he has a problem with me, which is an example, which is an excellent example of the point of the post. Nobody owes you their agreement, Scott Vapington. Yeah, I'll say your name because you publicly posted on my page and then blocked yourself. You know, and you know, white people. I got to speak from my own lived experience. I'm getting really sick and tired of you accusing me of having an attitude or being rude just because I don't agree with you. As I've stated before, I am not your Negro. And that's why I absolutely love the community that we're building on this channel because the type of communities that we're building are communities where we understand that people will disagree, that people will have different lived experiences. And there is absolutely no reason to dehumanize anybody for that. And white people, you've been doing this to black folk for damn near 200 years. That anytime we have a problem with something you're doing, or we have a problem with something you say, or we have the audacity to think something differently from you, all of a sudden we're problematic. We're trouble. Well, I've been trouble since the day I got here, and I will continue to be. So I responded to his response by saying, I wish I could say the same. I don't take kindly to trollish behavior. And honestly, this all gives like, agree with me or you're not my friend. Hey, then we're not friends, bro. I got up from the children's table for a very real reason. Now, I know this has been a lot. Stick with me just for a little bit because I want to highlight this very point because this is crucial. Let's notice what I am not saying in my post because it's important because if you read their responses, you think that I said vote third party, which I've never said. I've never told anybody to vote third party. Actually, that's something I would never do. And that may be my pastoral baggage. That as a pastor, like I'm not telling you who to vote for. You would also think I've told people to vote Republican based off of this. I've never said that. I never said vote for Trump. I never said don't vote for Kamala. I never said don't support Democrats. But that is what these two responders are responding to, which means they're not capable, at least in regards to this context, of reading a post and knowing that what somebody else is saying has absolutely nothing to do with the shit that's on their mind. You know, which I deal with this a lot, you know, and I don't know if it's my neurodivergency that makes me very averse to this type of shit, but I don't like it. And here's a reminder of what I did say. I did say that posts like these are absolutely disgusting. And that is my opinion concerning the taste of this type of post. I did introduce a valid counterpoint, which is what you do when you're highlighting why you don't support something. You introduce a valid counterpoint. Neither of these responders did so. My counterpoint was that third party voters are often themselves from marginalized groups, which the original meme implies as non existence, which completely dehumanizes marginalized groups who are in support of third parties, such as many Palestinian Americans who are having a hard time with both of the traditional parties right now. This is a strong argument that highlights the diversity of the voter base and challenges the meme's oversimplification and the veracity of its central claim. I also described voter shaming as the political censure of dissent, positioning it as anti democratic, which it is. This is an argument that aligns with the democratic values of freedom of expression and the importance of diverse political opinions. This is the danger of polarization. And this is something that political parties have been using against us for so long, to get you so riled up against the other person that you stop critically engaging. What I see going on in politics is shameful. You hear somebody name calling, so now you start name calling. Like, get out of here, man. Like, let's be adults. My children are more mature than most of these people. I also argued that voting is a way to take the temperature of the nation, which is a point about the broader function of elections beyond just elected officials. Neither of these responders addressed either of the points that I made, nor the points that were in the original meme. When your goal is to understand, it actually becomes easier to highlight logical fallacies. In this Sunday's conversation, we talked about soldier mindset versus scout mindset. What both of these responders demonstrated is soldier's mindset. I am here to defend. What I demonstrated, especially in the second one, is scout mindset. I want to understand why you're saying this. You know, neither one could demonstrate why they were saying what they were saying, which isn't a shock for me. That's 99% of the people on this planet. This is why the work is important. We keep thinking this is a religious issue. It's not. It's a people issue. As I've said many times on this channel, religion didn't make us superstitious. We were superstitious and we gave them to our religions. You know? And so we need to begin to acknowledge that about our species, that we are more naturally wrong than we are right. And just because you feel emotionally attached to anything doesn't give you the right to superimpose that on anybody else. If you continue to shame people from expressing their desires at the ballot based on your alleged specialized knowledge, which should govern your vote and no one else's, mind you, you may force them to turn to the bullet. Political censure is often the straw that breaks that camel's back. Now, I know I've been on here for a while, but I definitely wanted to share this information and hit this with you. I know for some of you, this is going to rub the wrong way, and I don't care. This is me. I'm not going to censor my thoughts to make you comfortable, especially if I'm not saying anything that is harmful to anybody else's well-being. We need to expand the conversation. And right now, the Democratic Party is not doing that. The Republican Party is not doing that. And so please don't make your relationships with other people about party politics. Don't think you know somebody because of propaganda. Like, this is horrible. This is disgusting. People vote for a myriad of reasons. None of those reasons have to have anything to do with you. None of those reasons have to have anything to do with your reasons. Your reasons are valid for you. If this country is to remain a democracy, we have to respect everybody's rights, not just the rights of the people we agree with. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, and check out the merch. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful if you can. I'm out.